Hey everybody, today we're talking about how to get objects from Blender into MX bikes. So step one, I'm using L3DT for all of my height map editing. Whatever program you're using, we need to get our height map exported as a PNG file, which is a file that Blender can understand and interpret. So I'm just going to go ahead and by selecting the height field tool or the height field layer, we're going to export map. We're going to select PNG in the dropdown, and then I'm going to name the file blender_heightmap.png. I've already done this, and I'm just going to redo what I've already done for the sake of the tutorial. But you want to get that file named. You want to name it in a place you know where it is, so we can get it in just a second. And then for export size, you will want to keep your square plus 1. So 2048 plus 1 is 2049. We want to keep that as we export. So we exported our height map as a PNG, and now let's go ahead and open up Blender. Want to go ahead and delete everything here. We want to just have a bare collection, and that will allow us to get everything going in Blender. To move around in Blender, I hold down my center mouse wheel and rotate, and then if you want to move left and right, hold Shift and do the same thing. Center mouse wheel and Shift to go left and right, and then you can spin up and down, same thing, Shift to move your mouse up and down, and then you can zoom in by scrolling or zoom in with holding Control and moving the mouse in and out. Blender can be a little bit confusing, but just so you know how I'm moving around. All right, to get our height map in here, we're going to want to Shift A, hold Shift and then A, create a mesh plane. Then we're going to open up this little tab here. We need to adjust our dimensions and our location. So my dimensions for my map are in my THT HMF, or they are on my map scale on my Resolute Kraken tool builder. So my map dimension is 276 by 276, and then my scale is 2.2. These are numbers we need to remember. 276, 276, and 2.2. So I'm going to adjust the dimensions of my X and Y to corresponding X and Z. So 276, tab 276. We now have a 276 meter plane by 276 meter plane, but we're not quite finished yet. We need to get this in a place that the game can recognize. So we need to move it to the corner, which is 276 or your respective map size divided by 2. Tab 276 divided by 2. Again, use your respective map size. So if your map size is 800 meters, then for location, it's going to be 800 divided by 2, and that will get the corner of the plane lined up with your origin here. So we have our plane. We need to get our height map on here, and we need to get a texture over it. So I'm going to click Tab with my plane selected. And I'm just going to subdivide this quite a few times. Let's go one more time. That should be enough for what we're doing. Maybe let's go one more. Go as far as your computer can go, because the more you subdivide, the more graphical fidelity you're going to get, the more accurately you'll be able to place your objects. Then we're going to go ahead and click out of tab and get rid of all of these points of subdivision. We need to go down to the bottom right hand corner and go to Texture Properties. We're going to add a new texture. Down here in Settings, click Open. We need to find our height map. So I found mine, blender_heightmap.png. Find yours and click Open Image. You will see it pop up here. We need to change our color space to linear. And then we are pretty much ready to go. Go ahead and change from viewport shading to material preview. So once we're done here, we're going to click on the little wrench. We're going to add a modifier, and we're going to add a displace modifier. We want to click this little selection here, the browse texture to be linked. Your height map should be there. Set your mid-level to 0 and your strength to your height scale. So my height scale is 2.2. Click Enter. and then click apply. And you will see that over here I have my height map popping up. But I really can't see any details, so we're going to do one more extra step to get our plane ready for our objects. I created a little texture with my masks earlier and just colored them and exported them as a 2048 TGA. And we're going to import those over the top so we can kind of see where our textures are. So we're going to click New Material under the Materials tab, Base Color, Image Texture, and then we're going to open up our overlay. You can name this whatever you want. I just named it overlay.tga. I threw this together in 10 seconds, but it works for me. The last thing you want to do to get our plane ready is right-click and just shade smooth. Shade smooth it once. That way it takes all the ridges out, and then you should see your beautifully sculpted height map ready to go. So before we start importing objects, we're going to do one more thing to prevent us from selecting and accidentally moving our plane. We're going to click on this little guy up here, Filter. We're going to add our Selectable Filter, and then we're going to uncheck that for our plane. That way, when we click, we can't accidentally add our plane or click our plane. Okay, so we are going to import and export our first object. I'm going to be using, for the sake of this tutorial, my banner mega pack. So I'm going to go down to Import FBX. Let's find that mega pack. So I'm actually going to go to the original file directory. So Agitado's banners. Here are all of my objects. Let's go ahead and import the AGMX banner first. You'll see it pop down here in the left-hand corner. Right, your origin. We're going to go ahead and select it and click our Move tool. And we're just going to get that kind of to where we want to place it. So for this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and place a banner around the corner of this berm here. So I'm going to leave my banner right here for right now. And I'm going to add a Bezier Curve, and that's what's going to follow or allow our banner to be curved and follow our track. So I'm going to Shift A, I'm going to select a curve, Bezier Curve. I'm going to make a new collection just entitled Curves. I'm going to take that curve, drop it down here. I'm going to move this curve using our Move tool. Gonna get this kind of where I want it to be. I'm gonna click 7 to get a top-down view, and then hold Shift and my middle mouse wheel to move around. Tab into edit mode, and then we have a little line here. So I'm gonna put the middle of this line where I want the curve to start, and I'm gonna grab one of the ends and move it around. You'll see how if you move these little vertices or these balls on the end, it adjusts the shape or the curvature of our line. We're going to use these to add some curviness to our line and kind of manipulate it a little bit. So I'm actually going to move this one here. Going to move this here. We're going to get our curve lined up with the top of our berm here. Make sure it's kind of following the center all the way around. I'm going to highlight my next point. You can see the direction the curve is going here with these little arrows. I'm going to click E to extrude, click it where I want it to be, and then I will grab my point with G. G is how I'm grabbing and moving, by the way. And we're just going to kind of grab our points and move them around. Now that should be pretty close to where we want things. So I'm going to click A to select all. Subdivide, 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 just so we can get some more points upon which our curve can be sucked to our plane. I'm going to click Tab out of edit mode, and then we have our curve here. I'm going to add a modifier. I'm going to shrink wrap, target, plane. Don't miss these steps. Project, is you have to switch your mode to project, positive and negative direction with the axis being Z, and then you should see your curve get kind of glued to your height map here. If you are in edit mode, you won't be able to apply, so tab out and then click apply. You have to apply your modifiers to your curves before you try to put an object on them. So how do we get the banner to here? We're going to do two things. One, we're going to add an array modifier, and we're going to add a curve modifier. I've kind of drug my object to the start of my curve here, and I'm going to, this is my array modifier, down here on my curve modifier, select my object as Bezier Curve. My object disappeared. Sometimes it's just a matter of finding it, but I can see it down here. So I'm going to grab this and drag it up. I can see that I need to get it over to my curve, so I'm just going to move it, kind of mess around with it a little bit, and get it all lined up. Actually, my object has managed to be rotated the wrong way. So I'm going to reset my rotation to 0 and kind of get it lined up with the end of my curve here. I'm going to zoom in and grab the blue arrow and hold shift to make some fine adjustments. That way I can make sure that the banner is exactly centered on the line. And then I want to just go ahead and increase the count until it is at the end of the curve. And there we are. And you can adjust this. With different objects, you can do go ahead and fit curve. My objects, and you can select the curve. My objects don't do that for some reason. I haven't quite figured out why. So I just go ahead and used fixed count, and I just do that all manually. And that works fine for me. And there we have my object on the curve. So you can go ahead and apply your modifiers, or you can leave them unapplied. I leave them unapplied generally, so I can just grab this object, duplicate it, and put it somewhere else and have new modifiers. If you apply them, you really can't undo them without deleting the object, to my knowledge. So, okay, before we go ahead and export, let's add one more object that doesn't require a curve. We're going to go ahead and add a finish line. So we're going to import my AMA finish line. Let me go ahead and find it real quick. That is going to be under desktop. Oh, what was that under? Track arches package. There we go. I'm going to import my track archway package. Let's grab our finish line here. I'm going to go ahead and just drag it over. Yeah, there's our finish line jump right there. Going to rotate it to 90 degrees. And just kind of get it lined up here. This is a Supercross track, and a AMA outdoor national finish line should not go on it. But I'm just doing this for the sake of the video. Okay, there is our finish line object. So, if you have organized your objects in collections, then you can export with collection, but since I haven't, I'm going to go ahead and just select the objects that I want to export. So I'm going to hold shift, drag over this entire object so I get all the layers in there, and I'm going to click on this banner. And you can see what I'm exporting here. So I'm going to go ahead and file, export as an FBX. I export it to my build, and we will export this as object test. You can name it scenery, you can name it whatever you want. It just needs to be consistent. So I'm going to export mine as object test .fbx. Selected objects is what I'm choosing to export, and then I need to export them as a mesh. So let's go ahead and export them. We can minimize Blender. I'm using a Resolute Kraken track tool, so I have a couple hotkeys. Now we're going to open up FBXtoEDF. We're going to load object_test.FBX, and then we're going to save it as object_test.EDF. Save. Mine is obviously already there because I've done this a time or two. And then we're going to click Convert. And FBXtoEDF will start doing its thing. It will let you know if it has any errors. And if you selected a Bezier curve or your plane in exporting, it won't work. Make sure you don't select those objects when you go to export. And then for the sake of this video, I'm not going to build with shadows just because of a time constraint, but then we're going to go ahead and build all. This would be the equivalent of adding your, you're running your map.bat, centerline.bat, and all of those. The important thing here is, and I actually skipped a step, so let's back up for just a second. You want to make sure that you add your objects as a scene. So, as you can see in the track tool, I've added my object. So if I were to remove this, it would look something like this. Let's go ahead and remove. We're going to add a scene. I'm going to select my model, which is object_test.edf. And I'm going to include in HMF and include in THT. All right. These are both in charge of what we see and what we feel. So we want to make sure that we have them in both. So if we have an object named such as WLLCONC, which is the object collision prefix, that we can see it and feel it when we're in the game. So once you have that scene set up in your HMF and THT, then you can click Build All or run your 3 commands. So we're going to build the map file real quick, and then we will jump into the game and test them. Now, the more objects that you start to add, the more complex things get, the longer things are going to take. So if you're doing a build without shadows with, if you're doing a build without shadows, it's pretty common for it to take anywhere from 30 seconds all the way up to 3 or 4 minutes. And if you're doing a build with shadows, it's going to be anywhere from 5 minutes to 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how many objects that you have. FBXtoEDF, however, always runs fairly quickly. If you have a ton of objects, it might take a minute or 2, but it generally doesn't take longer than that. So if you're running into issues of it just sitting there and being idle, wait what you feel as though is a decent amount of time with how many objects that you have, and then maybe close out and try to re-export things, making sure you're not selecting any curves or anything like that. So here we go. We have imported our objects. Here are our banners, all lined up, looking nice. No collisions on the banners. And then we have our finish line. The finish line has that WLLCONC, which is the wall concrete collision prefix, which means that we should be able to actually collide with the object. Yes, we did collide with the object. Well, guys, that's all I've got for this tutorial. I hope you find it helpful. Best of luck exporting objects from Blender into MX Bikes, and if you have any questions, don't be hesitant to ask somebody on the Discord server. Thank you, guys. Good luck.